Hey friends, it's the Masked One. I bring you the truest, creepiest horror stories I can find and tell them like they happened to someone you knew. If you dig this kind of stuff, hit subscribe and stick around. They tell the story like this. It all kicks off in 1990 in a small American city. Our guy was born in 1972 and grew up in a pretty average, not rich, not poor family. He was quiet as a kid, the type who preferred books over games, careful with money, always counting his allowance like it was sacred. School came easy to him. Teachers liked him. He was the kid you'd bet would end up a doctor or professor. But life takes turns. Around 16, 17, something inside him cracked. The kid who once sat quietly reading started changing fast. He got aggressive, started picking fights, pulled away from his parents, hardly spoke to them. He wasn't the son anyone recognized, which made people around him, parents, friends, assume it was just teenage rebellion. But this wasn't a phase he'd outgrow. What he wanted more than anything was to lead. Not lead a club or captain a team. He wanted power over people. He wanted followers. Music became his mask. Not pop, not the radio stuff. He fell hard for heavy metal, a loud, dark kind with long hair, black clothes, guitars, and imagery that played with the idea of the occult. He didn't just go to shows. He lived the look and the language. Most kids who copied bands would go back to normal life after a concert. Not him. He treated the band lifestyle like a second skin. At first it was aesthetic, the clothes, the attitude. Then it went deeper. He started collecting books on the occult. The first one he bought was a compendium of demon names and obscure rituals, the sort of lurid grimoire people whisper about. He devoured it. Where other kids read fiction, he read rituals and lists of entities, the proper ways to call things up and the implements you needed. He pooled every dollar he could get, from his allowance, from small jobs, and built a small library of books on dark magic. He began staying out late, vanishing into the night, leaving his family puzzled and worried. Because he wanted followers, he started trying to recruit. Old friends brushed it off. They thought he'd gone through a phase. His parents figured it was teenage trouble, but he had charisma. There was something about his voice and stance that made people listen. He could sell an idea even when it was ridiculous. Over months, he picked up a few kids who were looking for belonging. Not brilliant minds, but malleable teens who wanted to feel important. By 1991, he'd found the people he needed. Among them was a girl named Demi, 15, who lived on his block. He spun a line about love and destiny to get close to her, told her he could connect with powers she couldn't imagine. She fell for his attention the way lonely kids do. She wanted to belong, to be special. He promised her initiation and a place in something bigger. To seal the deal, he staged an initiation, a black cloth, a pentagram drawn on the ground, candles, and him reading out of a book he'd called the Necronomicon, a theatrical, antique-sounding name he thought would make everything feel real. He claimed the book held keys to power. Demi, trusting and swept up, played along. Once she was in, he used her to recruit a quieter kid who used to be Demi's boyfriend, Manny. He convinced Manny the whole thing was an investment, like joining a secret society that would change their lives. Manny was hesitant at first, then gave in after a while, enough to become the last piece of the small group. With Manny on board, their loose gang became a tiny closed circle. Initiation rituals escalated quickly, from dark jokes to dangerous acts meant to prove loyalty. One initiation forced someone to take part in a violent act involving an animal. I won't describe the gory specifics, but the point is they crossed a line. The act bonded them, not in any noble way, but it gave them the shared knowledge that they had done something they could never take back. After that, they kept meeting, and the meetings kept getting darker. Where once it had been music and myth, now it became a pattern of abuse and cruelty that threatened to spiral. He wanted more than small-time depravity. He wanted showmanship, spectacle, and a bigger claim to power. By late summer of 1992, he was restless. He told the others that the books had told him of a recruitment, that an entity wanted a particular girl brought to a remote place. He insisted the girl had to lose consciousness briefly so the transition could happen. That way, he argued, the ritual would succeed and the entity would accept them. They picked a girl, Dora, 14, someone who had shown interest in their group and who trusted them. They told her they'd show her the hidden world, She was eager, young, and impressionable. They brought her out at night to a deserted place in the hills, set up the same theatrical paraphernalia, cloth, candles, a circle, and a book, and tried to make her faint with chanting and light strikes. When that failed, things turned ugly. They overpowered her, and the night ended in tragedy. Dora didn't survive the encounter. The group, stunned and terrified, burned evidence and scattered what they could. For a moment, they felt a sick kind of accomplishment. They believed they had offered something that would reward them. Demi realized she'd been misled. The plan hadn't been to render Dora unconscious. It had been something far worse. That murder was the first of a pattern. Over the following year, their acts multiplied. On one winter night in 1993, they abducted and killed another woman, a traveler who had come home for the holidays, someone going about their life and suddenly in the wrong place at the wrong time. These weren't tidy crimes. These were brutal, opportunistic, and meant to shock. The group left traces, then tried to erase them, burning personal items, tossing fake IDs into storm drains, anything to cut ties. Guilt chased some of them. Manny, for example, was crushed by conscience during a later period away in naval service. Sleep became impossible. Dreams became scenes of what they had done. That guilt eventually pushed him to confession, but not before the group had already done terrible things that left scars on the community. By 1994, the group had already built a dark reputation in whispers among local kids and teens who had encountered them. Manny had finally admitted his part to his parents while on leave from the Navy, explaining that he had participated in 2 murders and other crimes. His parents, terrified and confused, kept silent because he threatened to take his own life if they went to the police. So they stayed quiet, trying to protect him from himself, even as the guilt ate at them. Manny's inner struggle didn't let up. During the holidays, instead of enjoying his leave, he sunk deeper into anxiety and sickness. His parents persuaded him to see a counselor, the kind who deals with confession and guilt. There, Manny laid everything bare. For the first time, he admitted all the details of what the group had done, the rituals, the manipulations, the murders, everything. After leaving the counselor's office, he felt a strange relief, a weight lifted, and he resolved to do the right thing, turn himself in. But before heading to the police, he wanted a final meeting with Demi and Catsoul. No hints, no warnings, just to sit with them. That was the last time the 3 of them were together privately. The next morning, Manny dressed carefully and went to the police station, confessing fully. The police told him that because he confessed voluntarily, his sentence might be lighter. The police soon summoned the rest of the group. By New Year's Eve of 1994, they were all arrested. Catsoul, Manny, Demi, and the other members of the small circle. Charges included 2 counts of murder, impersonating police officers, unlawful confinement, kidnapping of minors, and forming a criminal group. By June 1995, their trial began. During the trial, each member tried to shift blame to the others. Demi and Catsoul pointed at Manny as the mastermind, claiming he had orchestrated events. Manny insisted he was just following orders, that everything had come from Catsoul. Each witness, former participant and survivor, painted a picture of a group led by charisma, coercion, and fear. Demi even recanted parts of her earlier statements, admitting she had been under influence and manipulation. The court eventually delivered sentences. Catsoul received 2 life sentences plus 20 years for his crimes: murder, arson, kidnapping, and abuse. Manny received 2 life sentences plus 15 years. Demi, who was younger, was sentenced to 18 years and 4 months, recognizing her partial participation, but her youth. Other members of the group received various sentences, some short-term, some suspended. Media coverage was relentless. The case became a national spectacle dubbed the Devil Doll Case. Despite the attention, none of the core perpetrators spoke publicly. Demi cried during coverage but was shielded. Manny kept his head down at all times, refusing to answer questions. Catsoul, meanwhile, carried himself like he had nothing to hide, arrogant and unrepentant. In the years that followed, the convicted went through different paths. Demi was released in 2001 for good behavior, married and had 2 children, but later faced a divorce in 2015. Manny was released in 2013, having studied programming in prison, and chose a quiet, remote life. Catsoul was released in December 2016 and retreated from public life entirely.
The story leaves a clear lesson. Watch your kids closely. Notice their interests, who they hang out with, and where they go. Don't spy or pressure them. Instead, be near them, participate in their world, and earn their trust. Show them they belong, that you are there for them. If they feel that, they won't seek belonging somewhere dangerous. Share their passions, talk to them, and guide them gently, not with force, but with connection. By the time the group had been convicted, the town was still reeling from the horror. People talked about the murders for years, haunted by how ordinary some of the perpetrators seemed in everyday life. But the aftermath revealed just how deep the psychological scars ran, not only for the survivors, but even for the young members who had been manipulated into complicity. Manny, now behind bars, reflected on the years of fear and powerlessness he felt within the group. While in the Navy, he had tried to escape reality, burying himself in routine, but the memories always returned, vivid nightmares replaying the terror of those nights, the screams, the violence, the fire, the guilt. He couldn't sleep without reliving the final moments of the victims, and no amount of discipline could erase the echoes of what he had seen and done. Demi, on the other hand, spent her early years in prison fighting both shame and fear. Being young, she had been impressionable, easily swayed by the older, more controlling figures like Katzel. In prison, she learned to survive quietly, to keep her head down, and to reflect on how fear had been used to manipulate her actions. She eventually earned good behavior, allowing her early release, yet the trauma lingered, and the fear of ever being manipulated again never fully left her. Katzel remained the most dangerous psychologically. Even in prison, he exhibited the same arrogance and lack of remorse. While other members eventually accepted their punishment, Katzel manipulated the system, exploiting weaknesses and alliances to maintain his sense of control. His release years later shocked many who believed he would remain incarcerated for life. And when he returned home, he vanished from public view entirely, leaving behind only whispers of his presence. Outside the prison walls, the public became obsessed with understanding how such a group could form and operate. Experts debated the influence of peer pressure, psychological manipulation, and the seductive nature of authority within a small, secretive circle. Survivors and witnesses recounted their experiences in hushed tones, emphasizing the importance of trust, vigilance, and understanding in preventing vulnerable people from being drawn into destructive groups. Families who had children in the area began to take precautions. Parents started engaging more actively in their kids' lives, joining them in activities they loved, watching who they associated with, and creating environments where children felt safe to express themselves. Communities began holding workshops on spotting manipulative behavior, the dangers of cult-like groups, and the importance of fostering open communication rather than fear-based control. Despite the grim story, one lesson emerged clearly. Vigilance, connection, and understanding in families and communities can prevent tragedies like these. By recognizing early signs of danger, maintaining trust, and being genuinely present in the lives of young people, many could avoid falling prey to manipulation and violence.
Each other about signs of manipulation and grooming. But the memory of those tragic nights still haunted the town. Manny, Demi, and Katzel's paths had diverged dramatically after prison, but each carried invisible scars that shaped their lives forever. Manny, after his release, settled in a quiet rural area, far from anyone who knew him. He worked as a programmer, building a routine that allowed him to exist without constant confrontation with his past. Yet every so often, the nightmares returned. The smell of smoke, the screams, the weight of powerlessness. Though he avoided people, he sometimes volunteered anonymously, helping troubled youth, trying to atone in small ways for the chaos he had been part of. Demi tried to rebuild her life in a more visible way. She married, had children, and attempted to create a normal family life.
but the shadows of the past lingered. Her interactions with her kids were careful, protective. She understood how fear and manipulation could take hold. She became hyper-aware of the subtle ways people could influence the vulnerable, and often shared her story anonymously to warn others, emphasizing vigilance without spreading panic. Katzel, on the other hand, vanished almost entirely. He returned to his family briefly after his release, but no one heard from him for years. Some claimed he moved far away, living under a new identity, while others whispered that he still sought control over people in secretive ways. His lack of remorse remained disturbing, and even in freedom, he was a ghost, a reminder that evil can exist quietly, out of sight, long after justice seems served. The survivors, especially those who had witnessed the events but avoided direct harm, struggled with complex feelings. They wrestled with guilt, fear, and the sense that their inaction had consequences. Communities learned to support survivors more intentionally, creating spaces for discussion, counseling, and public awareness campaigns. Schools began teaching about manipulation, coercion, and the importance of speaking up. Even years later, the story was used as a cautionary tale in books, documentaries, and interviews, not to sensationalize, but to educate. People talked about the thin line between ordinary curiosity and dangerous fascination, how easily manipulation can disguise itself as trust or friendship, and how critical it is to maintain vigilance without fostering paranoia. Families became proactive. Parents joined their kids in activities, watched who they spent time with, and encouraged open dialogue. Trust became the armor against outside threats, and shared interests became bridges rather than divides. Children learned to see the difference between guidance and control, between genuine friendship and coercion. Through all the tragedy and terror, the central lesson remained: awareness, trust, and communication are powerful shields. By being present, understanding, and engaged, families and communities can prevent horror from reaching the vulnerable and break cycles of manipulation before they escalate.